Hello AP World History students, this is Mrs. Longnecker back with another video lesson. Today I'm going to talk to you about the LEQ, the long essay question. This is just an introduction. There will be more videos and lessons that go along with this topic. So I'm going to give you an overview of what the LEQ is, how you'll be scored on the LEQ, a general sense of how you could structure or lay out your writing in the LEQ, and then I'll take you through annotating a sample prompt, and then for my students, some what do I do now guidelines for your first in-class writing assignment. Students from other classes and other schools, welcome. I hope that the first chunk of this video is really helpful to you, and when we get into the stuff about specific assignments, you'll be able to stop watching and go home early. So let's get started. The LEQ is the last component of the AP exam. You'll have done your multiple choice, your short answer responses, and you have a choice between which essay you do first, your document-based question or your long essay question. But the order that the booklet goes in puts this long essay question last. And the long essay question definition from the College Board is here on the screen. And I just want to highlight a couple of things about it. First of all, notice what it is you need to do to receive a high score. You need to develop an argument. That means you need a thesis. You need to support that argument with an analysis of specific, relevant, historical evidence. We've been saying that for every writing task all year long. Support your argument with specific evidence. Also notice here at the bottom, the long essay questions ask about large-scale topics, the College Board says, but they are framed to allow students to provide in-depth discussion of specific examples drawn from the concept outline or from classroom instruction. What that means is that they are big picture topics with the intent that you will choose the evidence and the information that you know best. They're always going to be open-ended enough that if you choose that particular topic, you should be able to pull out some specific evidence from your learning and apply it successfully to that prompt. I love this overview of what this task is from Freemanpedia. Mr. Freeman has a fantastic review website. If you haven't checked it out yet, go Google it now. I'll wait while you come back. But he says that the basic setup of a long essay question is this. They give you the rubric. The College Board gives it to you as bullet points at the top of the page. Then they ask you a question. Your job, you need a thesis, you use the skill they're asking for, back it up with evidence, and boom, that's it. That really is it. It's a difficult task because you're relying completely on your own background knowledge and your ability to work that into a successful argument, but it's not super strict or specific about numbers of sentences or word choice or spelling or any of that. It's really about proving your thesis using the skill that's being asked for in the prompt. Because people always ask me, I'll tell you right up front, you get 40 minutes to do this on the AP exam, start to finish. For what it's worth, many people say they don't need the whole time. And in fact, many people are able to take extra time on their document-based question and shortcut a little bit on the long essay question because as you get used to this process, you're going to get faster and faster at doing it. And a lot of people average around 30 minutes rather than taking the whole 40. That being said, we'll talk way more about timing in other lessons. So let's get into the meat of what you need to do to be successful on this, this part of the exam. So here's the rubric, just the basic bare bones version of the rubric. We'll get into each of these points in more detail, either in a little while or in future lessons. But there are 6 possible points on this LEQ. There's 1 point for a successful thesis statement, a point for contextualization, a point for having evidence, a point for supporting your argument, a point for historical reasoning, and a point for complexity. You need 4 of these in order to pass and set yourself up for an overall pass on the AP exam. So the 4 that I think you should focus most of your effort and your attention on, especially here at the beginning of the year, are the ones that I've put in bold. Thesis, evidence, historical reasoning, And then contextualization is bolded and italicized because we're going to come back to that in a later lesson. It deserves a little bit more time than we have to give today. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail, point by point, for the ones that you need right now. First is your thesis. Now, thesis in world history writing is like a thesis in English writing. It is that introductory statement that gives the overall answer to your question and sets you up to build your argument throughout the rest of your essay. The language from the College Board is that your thesis needs to present what they say is a, quote, historically defensible claim. So what this means is that your answer has to make a claim. You have to have an argument. You can't simply restate the prompt and call that your thesis statement. And your claim has to be historically defensible. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be relevant to what the prompt is asking you. The other rule about your thesis statement is that it has to be in either the introduction or the conclusion of your essay. Beyond that, the rules are much looser. There's no rule about number of sentences for your thesis. There's no hard and fast rule about exactly how your thesis has to be phrased. I'm going to give you some guidance on that as we work through some of these example prompts throughout the course of this year. But really, your thesis is about presenting your claim right up front in your introduction. You're also going to earn a point for having evidence. You need to have specific examples, plural, relevant to the prompt. So there's some key ideas in here. First is specific. This is where proper nouns, people, places, events, specific relevant details are the watchword of the day. Key vocabulary is great to use. And if you're not sure and you can't think of that proper noun or that historical vocabulary, describe in as much detail as you can the evidence that you're trying to present. Along with being specific, you need more than one example. Notice that it's examples plural. So 2 plus. Really, we're looking at 2 plus per body paragraph for a strong essay. So you're thinking, okay, what are my examples about this particular part of my argument? And giving examples, plural, for each part of your argument as you build it. And then lastly, with the evidence, your evidence needs to be relevant to the prompt. You need to choose evidence that specifically relates to what the prompt is asking about and the particular historically defensible claim that you have made in your thesis statement. All of it needs to link together, ideally, to build your best possible essay. Along with thesis and evidence, you need to use what the College Board is calling historical reasoning. And this is just where you use the skill the question asks for to structure your essay. So if the prompt given is a comparative prompt, you need to use a model of comparison where you think about similarities and differences and directly comparing two societies or civilizations together. If the prompt is change or continuity, or change and continuity over time, you want to address that and the process of change or process of continuity over time in a particular topic. If it's a cause and effect essay, you want to think about what were the major causes of a particular event or development, or what were the effects of that event or development, depending on what the prompt is asking for. So this is where reading and analyzing the prompt carefully before you start writing is really important, because if you understand what the prompt is asking, you can structure your writing to successfully earn that historical reasoning point. We're going to come back to, like I said, come back to contextualization in a future lesson, but that would be the fourth of the 4 key points that you need to focus on in terms of doing your best on this. We will also in future lessons come back to those other 2 points, the point about supporting your argument and the point about historical complexity. Those are more difficult points to earn on the exam. So for right now, we're going to focus in on the really straightforward ones, the ones that are easy to see in your own writing, so that you can develop those, get really good at those, and then start adding in some of the nuance and the detail that takes an essay from good to great. So I'm imagining that you're thinking right now, but what do I do? You've told me what this LEQ is. You've told me what kind of points I'm going to earn, but what do I actually do when I write this thing? So here it is, structured like you would structure for an English essay. You're going to have an introduction, an introductory paragraph. For right now, that introductory paragraph primarily, or in fact only, consists of your thesis. Your thesis introduces your main argument, and your main argument needs some element of analysis. So not restating the prompt, but instead actually making that claim about similarities and differences or cause and effect or whatever the prompt might ask for. The body of your, excuse me, the body of your essay is where you prove your thesis. You're going to prove your thesis using evidence. So you're going to make subclaims just like you would in an English paper. Each paragraph is going to have its own subtopic. You'll have a topic sentence. You'll have evidence that supports that topic sentence. And just like you do in the short answer question, you've given your statement, your evidence, and you'll explain your reasoning to make sure that your answer is clear and complete. Clear and complete, that's a key for writing in AP anything, being clear and complete. So introduction, thesis, body, prove it, use evidence, explain yourself, and then your conclusion. Now there is no separate point for a conclusion, so if you run out of time and can't write a conclusion, don't panic. The value of a conclusion is that it's the only other place in the essay where you can earn credit for your thesis. So my strong recommendation is to restate your thesis in new words in your conclusion. And my reasoning is this: sometimes because you start with the thesis in the introduction, it's a little bit unformed, maybe a little vague or a little bit unclear. But by the time you've written those 2 or 3 or 4 body paragraphs, depending on how ambitious you're feeling, by the time you get through all those body paragraphs, you have a much clearer understanding of what it is you were actually arguing in this essay. And if you restate or kind of bring together your ideas in one final thought in your conclusion, that's a place where if your thesis was weak and vague at the beginning, that stronger thesis at the end could guarantee you that thesis point. It's a little bit of a safety net for yourself. So thesis in the introduction, thesis in different words in the conclusion. Because if you just restate it in the same words, that doesn't help you any. So that's the overall structure of your essay itself, which again, I know is a little bit abstract. So let's take a look at a prompt, analyze the prompt itself, and think through how we're going to apply this model to an actual LEQ in class. So your first task for my class is this prompt. Evaluate the extent to which methods of imperial administration in Afro-Eurasian states or empires between 200 BCE and 600 CE changed from earlier political forms. There is a lot of vocabulary crammed into this prompt. So let's break it down piece by piece and think about what it all really means. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the task itself, the question that's being asked. And if we were to rephrase this prompt as a question, it would sound something like this. What changed and what stayed the same in the methods of imperial administration in Afro-Eurasian states or empires between 200 BCE and 600 CE? So the task is a change and continuity over time. Even though the prompt is structured with just the word change in it, the continuity is implied in this word evaluate. Evaluate the extent to which, how much changed and how much stayed the same. So you'll want to address both change and continuity in the argument that you state in your thesis, as well as in your body paragraphs. I would recommend a paragraph about change and a paragraph about continuity in the body of your essay. So we know that it's change and continuity over time. We know that we're thinking about those processes. So let's move on to the what. Now, the what in this case are methods of imperial administration, which means that this is a how question. So method is how is something done. And imperial administration are the ways in which states govern, rule over, and control their people. So a lot of this is going to relate to your political spice theme, that P box on your spice charts. But it's in some cases, it may also bring in other elements like culture. Perhaps a government uses belief systems, philosophies, or religion to control or govern over their people. And in that case, that would be a valid topic or idea to bring into your overall writing. There may be some economic controls that get used as well with trade or taxation or those kinds of things. But methods of imperial administration are the ways that states or empires rule over, govern, and control their people. So we're evaluating the ways that these methods of imperial administration changed and stayed the same. And then the last part is just who and when. Like, what are we talking about here? This particular prompt is pretty broad. It's Afro-Eurasian states and empires. So that's anything in Africa, Europe, or Asia. And I've written it as states or empires because I don't want to limit you to just the large major empires. You could choose one of the smaller states if that is beneficial. I have restricted you, though, in terms of dates, 200 BCE to 600 CE. So notice that I'm not giving you the very beginning of time period 2. I'm asking you to think a little bit later into time period 2, kind of not quite the halfway mark, and then all the way to the end of time period 2 is fair game. I'm leaving it a fairly broad time period because, again, I want you to have plenty of choices to pick from. But with 200 BCE, we're really, for example, not looking at the Persians, we're not looking at the Greeks, but we are looking at possibly the Romans. We might look at the Maurya or Gupta societies in India. And we could look at particularly the Han Dynasty in China and a little bit the Qin as well, although that's kind of fudging it a little on the early end. But still, plenty of choices to work from as you're thinking about what examples do you know best. Additionally, just notice this last phrase, earlier political forms. So this is where you may want to narrow your focus into a particular world region or particular state or empire. So you can think about who came before them. If you're thinking about states and empires in the Mediterranean, think about Unit 1 civilizations in the Mediterranean. Think about civilizations that are early in Unit 2, but maybe don't count for this essay, and how they may have connected with or impacted later civilizations. Same thing in India, same thing in China. If you're thinking about those particular regions, who came earlier? What do you know about those earlier political forms? And what changed? So how did the Romans change their methods of imperial administration from earlier systems? What stayed the same? How did the Chinese create continuity from earlier systems? What ideas from Unit 1 did they bring forward into their methods of imperial administration under the Han Dynasty? How did the Mauryans or the Gupta Empire bring from previous civilizations in India into their reigns, or what changes did they represent from those earlier times? So that's your prompt with a little bit of walkthrough and analysis of what that prompt is actually asking. And here's what I'd like you to do with this. So if you are in my class, hopefully you were in class today and were able to pick up a copy of the prompt and outline handout. If you weren't in class, make sure you download that from Schoology because it's going to walk you through some preparation for your actual in-class write. You want to work your way through the front page on that outline handout first. So that's where we annotated the prompt itself. You're also going to have space to do some general brainstorming. It's a change analysis chart. So earlier characteristics in a region, later characteristics in a region, thinking again specifically methods of imperial administration, and then in the center of that change column, what changed, what stayed the same, and thinking about that analysis. There's also a sample thesis statement where you can fill in the blanks to set yourself up for a clear, historically defensible argument. And you can use that model on the front side of your outline handout. As you're working through that outline handout, you should ask lots of questions. Ask questions from me, ask questions from your friends, but ask questions. Make sure that you're not just fumbling and flailing. Do your best to work through it on your own, but when you get to that stuck point, ask rather than just sitting and panicking. On the back side of your outline handout, there's a space for you to create an outline that organizes your thinking. This outline and the Classical Empires Review chart that we started in class, the white and gray chart, those are the only two papers that you can use during your actual in-class write. But for this first essay, you will be allowed to use that outline. So you can structure your outline in whatever way is going to be meaningful to you. If that means basic bullet points, awesome, sounds great. If that means full sentence topic sentences with basic bullet points underneath that, so you've done a little bit of pre-writing and then just kind of gathered together your evidence, also great. If you wanted to do a mind map or a web or a chart of some kind, you could also create that on the back of your outline handout. As you're doing that, be sure to ask more questions. Send me an email, check in with me before school or during bear time, but this is your opportunity to plan and prepare. You won't have this much time, of course, on the AP exam, but for this first essay, I want you to go in with the most confidence that you can possibly have for this task and really be sure that you've brought together all of the information so that it's more about you practicing your writing skills than it is about, oh, what can I remember in the moment in class? That being said, please do not go and do a bunch of internet research for this project. None of the questions that you are asked on the AP exam are intended to need that level of outside work. Use your notes that you've taken in class, your notes that you've taken from your reading, or any notes that you've taken from outside resources. So if you've been on Fiveable, or if you've been using a Princeton review book already, or if you've checked out Freemanpedia, and you have notes from those places, you can go ahead and incorporate those into your outline, but please don't be spending 17,000 hours going out and doing research. That's not the point of what this assignment is all about. So ask questions, use your information well, create an organized plan for yourself so that you're ready to use that outline to help you be successful in actually writing out your essay in class on, I believe it's the 22nd. You'll have to check your calendar and make sure I'm right about that. And then lastly, just keep an eye on Schoology. Check for updates for any supplemental lessons, etc. If there's something that I think of that will benefit you, I will make sure to post it so that you have access to it beforehand and it can benefit you. That's about it for today, an introduction to the LEQ. Again, ask lots of questions if and when you have them, and I'll be back at you soon with a new lesson.